CEOs and salespeople are confident that their opinion is the right one. Are they? Welcome to the CEO and Salesman podcast, where we talk about today's business issues and we'll let you work out who's right. It's me, by the way.
Hi, welcome to episode 4 of the CEO and the Salesperson's podcast. My name is Matthew. My good friend here is Daniel, and we talk about business growth from particularly different, I guess you could say, different perspectives. My background is in sales, and of course, Daniel is the CEO. He's the adult in the room. So, welcome, Daniel. How are you going?
Pretty good, Matt. Thanks for that introduction. Adult in the room, hey? I don't think my wife would say that about me, but
Right.
Thanks for the thought anyway.
Well, we were just talking about how in my early years I had a business. I started my first tech business at 22, and we got to about 4 or 5 years in, and I just felt that we needed some real, I guess, structure. So I hired a CEO, and I always felt that I needed that adult supervision. So I don't think I've really grown up from about 22 or 23, just to be quite honest. Seen a bit more.
Yeah, Matt. Look, I don't know. What we could talk about today, but that idea, because I've been in part of the founder communities in Australia, and I've talked to a lot of people and been at a lot of conferences, and myself, started a few businesses, and that idea that you can have a business and in yourself you feel that you don't have all the goods, so you're going to find this magical person. This is one of the common mistakes they make. You're going to find this magical person that's going to come into your business and deal with the business how you would as the founder. And it's interesting because you said you were younger at the time, so you felt and the adult in the room was you feel like you needed somebody more senior to yourself that may have the answers, because you may have felt insecure that you didn't have them, right?
Absolutely.
And that's a really common mistake many startup founders make. And if I ever find I'm talking to somebody, particularly who's younger and is just getting going on their journey, and they think out in the future they're going to find somebody to bring in, I say, you won't. Because they're not that they're mercenary, but they just won't have the same insights and passion and commitment to making it work as you will have as the CEO. I think it's a fundamental lack of understanding as to what the CEO role is when people do that, Matt.
Yeah, you're probably right. So how do you define the fundamental role of a CEO?
Well, before I say that, let me ask you, if you had stayed the CEO and got an operating officer in to run the business for you and tighten it up and make sure all your processes were working, would that have worked for you if you'd stayed the leader?
Probably, yeah. So I think you're absolutely, well, I don't think you're absolutely right. That would have been the shift. So, and also at that stage of my life, if I had understood more what an owner of a business or a CEO does and had some type of understanding there, because as I said, started the business at 22.
Yeah.
All I did was just be the best salesperson in the room. That was my only job, and thank goodness we had a great product and a great team sitting behind us that were able to execute on all that. But yeah, probably I guess a group or an influence group or a group of mentors, not necessarily mentors, but certainly peers would be probably more useful than hiring somebody to run the business for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I find COO and COO, CFO when you're really large, too many C's in the room right there. But understanding the difference between those responsibilities. Now, when you found a company, you do all of it, right? That's what you do.
Yep.
But eventually becoming the actual CEO the company needs means letting go of those other responsibilities, which should be taken care of by other people, but remaining the bastion of the strategy. Because that's what for me, the CEO embodies who we are as a company and what do we do, and they're the voice of the company out into the world. Okay, that's what it means to me, and that's what we're doing. We're projecting our voice by this podcast and saying this is what's important to us. If you want to do business with us, you'll know us. That's what's going on there. Where an operating officer or a COO or a general manager, they get on with making the business work really well. Yeah, and I think when you get to a certain size, and if you're trying to do both as the CEO, it gets very, very hard. In fact, you start making mistakes because you'll spend too much time in the business in reality. Yeah.
Yeah, got it. Hey, look, we were just talking before we jumped on, and I made a statement that we were talking about business growth and business success, as we often do in our conversations, even off camera. And I said that, well, the person in the business should know the best about the business's performance is the salespeople and marketing people, because they understand the business KPIs, or they should understand the business KPIs. And really, if those salespeople or marketing people get the sack or have to be removed, or whatever the new parlance is for basically getting the boot, they should be the least shocked person in the business. But you actually had a different story about that.
Yeah, man, I've been in some painful situations myself, and I think the euphemism you're looking for is right size. When you're right size, that's the management consulting speak. We need to right size the organization, lose 3,000 people. That's that type of thing. But yeah, I think, again, and I'm not, when I took on CEO and started a company or became CEO of some other companies, it was really interesting. Your perspective changes a lot, because like you, I've spent a lot of time in sales.
Yeah,
I've spent. And you do have that sense of, you're the kings of the world, or the queens of the, you're ruling the universe, because you're out there high-fiving, hitting targets, off we go, right? And you'd like to think that every company hits sales targets are going to be prosperous. And it's when you change your perspective, that's only one KPI out of many that a company needs to achieve to actually be profitable. Yeah. And so I was in a very difficult situation where we had a sales team who were actually doing pretty well.
Yeah.
But the sales weren't quite right for the company. Services team struggled a lot. There's a lot of friction, bad sale, you don't know what you're doing, all that type of stuff. And when you're in a recurring revenue business, that kills you. 3 years later, 40% of the customers weren't still there. And that really hurts, because your cost of sale tends to exceed your first year's revenue. And that was a company that was actually in a lot of distress. And to fix that it really had to bring the two teams together,
So what did you do to fix it?
I think the first thing is we had to redefine who our customers are, because if you looked at I looked at the book at the time, they were all over the place. It was like whoever knocked on our door, we sold to. It was, yeah, and so we had to redefine, because when you do that to a services team, they don't become good at anything. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, because if you have a mechanic that services every car or only BMWs, that mechanic's going to be an expert in BMWs. They're going to be able to put their ear to the bonnet and go, yeah, this is what's wrong, right? After 20 years. And if you owned a BMW, you want that guy servicing your car. It's the same principle, right? And so we had a service team that were functionally very good, but they found it very hard to relate to the business they were talking to, because every business rocking up was a different type of business.
Yeah, man, I talk about this all the time when I'm trying to get people to think about their sales and marketing, their strategy, how the business is going to go forward. And so many technology businesses are really good at doing pretty much anything. Give them any problem and they can solve that problem. And of course, what happens in the first sort of growth of the business is they do take on any and all problems and they solve them reasonably well. Now they come to people like me and they go, hey, we want to put the foot down. But what happens is I say, well, which direction? And they say, well, every direction. We're good at doing things with logistics, and we're good with doing things with manufacturing. We're good with things in the technology space with web. And it's really it's quite difficult for me to convince a business. And I find that convincing is not very effective anyway, but convince them to go ahead and focus on one thing and, be an inch wide and a mile deep in that, be able to put that. I like what you're thinking there, and put your ear to the engine and know that something's broken. And that's
because this is years of experience of doing the same thing over and over again, and also being passionate about becoming an expert. And that's and because in our space, you can be an expert in the product, but how do you apply the product to a different company? That's the real value. And
yes.
And so when we changed it, we changed our recruitment as well. We ended up saying, oh, we don't have that. This is the type of customer we want. We don't have that skill in our team. Let's go and get them. But previously, we had no recruiting plan around that. And so this is not, I don't want to say rocket science. This is not new. This approach is really, truly tried and tested. What I think a lot of small businesses get wrong is they don't know when to switch. So they've been really successful. Like you say, they explode. And it tends to be led by an owner who is passionate and deeply knowledgeable about what's going on.
Yes.
Right. And so that owner can make it all happen.
Yep.
Yeah. But how do you, and I used to call it, how do you employ a team of heroes? Because when an owner's doing that, they are the hero of the company, making the
Yes.
sale, saving the service deployment, and they've got the skills and they make it. And all the customers end up wanting is to talk to the owner. So how do you build a business around that? You know, be a contractor and you'll probably make lots of money and just be real about it.
Yeah.
But it's impossible because you can't build a team of owners because they all come and go off and be their own businesses, right? So it's a challenge.
So what advice would you give to a business who's growing, who's going through the process? What advice would you give them to say, hey, you know, this is how I need you to think, or how this is a thinking process or a structure you could work within?
Learn. In fact, I've got some of this from you, man. Learn while you're successful. Like, because when you talk about learn how you make your money, it's the same thing. Learn why you are being successful.
Yes.
And then bottle that and make that what you do. And that's a complex question to ask yourself. Type of company, type of staff, what's your value prop? This company I'm talking about made the mistake of thinking the value prop was the product. It wasn't, it was the people.
Yeah.
So all of a sudden, you know, putting in a new sales team, I said, the product's really good, but that's not going to be the reason these people buy from us. They're going to buy from us because of our people. And then when you make that the center stage for a service company, it becomes very powerful. So acknowledge how you got to where you are, learn why you, because there's everybody, you need to pivot, you start, doesn't quite work, you do something else, and all of a sudden something catches.
Yep.
And then you got to and you want to repeat that, not start the process all over again on the next deal. And if you can do that, and the final, if you're asking for advice, learn how to say no.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And you say no based on that reflection.
Yeah, it's, hey, I would love to have that customer come on because I feel I need the money right now, but I think I might go and try and find 3 of the others first because that customer's right in front of me. I need to say no to them, and that's just so hard to do. And that is that if you don't choose when you do that, you just end up in this, I've got all these customers, no real value prop, and I'm just the same as every other company out there that does what we do.
Yeah. And you become reasonably commoditized, and then it becomes a race to the bottom in price, right?
That's right. And then you're that mechanic. I'm just kidding. I'm trying to make my analogy work. You're that team of mechanics, which just the only marketing you've got is that people drive into you because you're not known for anything. Versus this one guy up on the hill that's known for being BMW experts. And if you love your BMW, you'll wait for that person to service your car.
Yep.
That's what you want to be, right?
Sure.
At the end of the day. Yeah. As a business.
Actually, that sort of talks to exactly the space, that the reason I started Tech Talk and the customers that I work with now is because I was working with a friend of mine who owned a digital marketing sourcing business. So he would supply products and services to digital marketing companies, and he asked me to come and help them with their sales. And I said, the first and really only piece of advice I would give them, not only but around sales, but the first piece of advice is, who do you help best, and who do you work with the most effectively, who pays you well? I'm just banging the microphone, and all of these other things. So what's the niche? What's the area? And nobody wanted to listen. No, because they were all too busy worrying about all the other things. So I started Tech Talk to sort of, not to show them that it could be done, but to say, well, I'm going to focus on just software and technology businesses. And, you know, we've been able to grow pretty well over the last couple of years doing that, only working with one niche. And I have people coming to me for SEO or coming to me for all these other services. And you're right, Daniel, when, you know, I want to grow the business, and the way I grow businesses by bringing more capital in, and the way I bring more capital is sell more stuff. It's very, very tempting. It's excruciating to say no to a deal. And I found myself saying yes. And then just before the deal is signed, look, I'm actually going to point you in a different direction, because I have a moment of reflection, because my blood gets up and excited. Okay, another customer. But it's so important for me. And I just, every single time I do this, I get rewarded. I don't want to say the universe rewards me. I'm not that type of person, but almost like the universe rewards me and says, okay, well, you've said no to somebody who's a C-class customer. Here's a B or an A-class customer that really is going to benefit the business.
Yeah, and it's kind of like, because back to the original question about, salespeople that are surprised that the business is not going so well, even though they're hitting targets, right?
Yeah,
I do think that's a leadership issue in that business when that happens, because if the sales team understands it's their job to fuel the engine that's already been built, not rebuild the engine on every single sale, right? I mean, how many have you? I've had new salespeople in my team, and they've come across, and I've just spoken to this company. I know we don't do it, but it's great. They're really hot to buy. Right? That's they've been here a month, and I go, yeah, but I don't have a team that can do that.
Yep.
I don't care that you can sell it. It's not the right sale. It's a bad sale. And I think having a lexicon in like a discussion in your business where bad sales are owned, because what salesperson will ever admit their sale was bad?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's right.
It's just
challenging, right? When if the salesperson is selling us on the deal, then it becomes there's potential challenges, and it's 100% of the time when I've onboarded C-class customers, I get a vast amount of customer service problems. It's almost boring in its consistency.
Yeah.
And that costs us money.
And here's an interesting tactic, right? Because that's you personally experiencing that. Like if you have people in your team, I now go, these sales for our space, what you're doing, you are responsible going in there 3 months after go live to get a case study.
Yep.
Right. And I say to the person in the team, it's really valuable that you do that, because you'll be able to personally take that case study to your next opportunity and say, I've just had a customer that did such and such. But also, they're part of the team that needs to make it successful for the customer. It's not none of this sell it and just move on stuff.
Yep.
And then the services team has put on notice that we're going to get a case study out of this customer. So the onboarding process, and the salesperson's part of that process, and they're available for conversation, because not everything goes right all the time.
No.
Sometimes there's friction. And then I want my salespeople to be involved in resolving that friction. And then people have said to me, yeah, but shouldn't they just be out there selling? And I said, yeah, but selling is successful projects, not sign a contract and move on, right? And we want to if there's no sense in doing lots of contracts that we're not successful at, then every now and then we have something that goes totally wrong, and we ask ourselves, was this a bad sale? Honestly, and I've had sales people there's threats of legal and commercial, which we've resolved. People just get heated. It can be passionate, and salespeople go, "Oh no, it was a good sale."
Yep. Good sale. High fives all around.
Problem.
That's it. Office Friday afternoon drinks, and we're all good. Meanwhile, the service team are tearing their hair out.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's I say all of that. It's a hard lesson to learn, and also you've got to get, if you're the owner, leader, CEO, whatever, you've got to get that timing right, and that's during your planning phase, right? So when you're planning for next financial year, make a decision. This is the year.
Yes.
Yeah, because prior to that, it's been we do whatever we can to stay alive, right?
Yep.
Yeah, and I get it. But at if you're consciously deciding that this is the year, it's the difference between having a strategic plan and an execution plan. It'll change everything you do in your execution plan for that year. And I think because a lot of people in there don't do proper planning, even for small companies, they just never have that conscious shift. Yeah.
Where does a person start with planning? I've in my business career, I've started conservatively probably 15 different businesses. At one stage, we had 7 companies all running under the one banner, and I was the self-appointed chair at the top of the table, and all my managers. And I felt the ego was stroked well and truly at that point. I was sub 30, so of course I was unbearable. But where do you start, or what advice would you give somebody who's starting to build out a plan? Because we see these. You go online and you go, right, well, I'm going to do a business plan. And it's dozens of pages of SWOT analysis and all this really complex stuff. And what advice would you give somebody who is in business, who's trying to grow, but what's the structure they use?
Yeah, so the first thing I've learned is a one-page version of everything. There's a one-page version of life plan. There's a one-page version of the strategic plan. The one-page version of budget. Yeah, I Google that. I don't look. For me, I'm very fortunate. I like to consume and learn. So you do online courses and study things. Other people would like to get somebody in to come and help them. And I always say with a little bit of caution though, those people will sound very good, be very professional. You will get good information out of them.
Yep.
But that's all it is information and advice. You have to make the call. And when you're making a plan, it's really about what questions you're asking and what the answers are.
Yeah.
Do I want to be profitable next year?
pretty
The answer
important.
could be no. And if no, get some funding, right?
Yep,
If yes, you don't need, how much profit do you want to have? I want 20% EBIT. Okay, well, that's great. Well, how much sales do you need to achieve that? Yeah, and you can do all of that on one page. It doesn't have to be complicated. So what are the questions? And then they become your assumptions. Then they become the backbone of the detail. And then when the detail is not reflecting your outcomes, you'll be able to see which assumptions you got wrong. All right. So
Yeah,
if
cool.
if you thought,
and how often do you review it?
this is where, for me, I'm a real numbers person. So I do a budget, then I forget it because I reforecast every single month for the full year. Yeah.
Wow.
So, and look, I'll do a comparative to budget because that was interesting. But what the budget did for me was what all the assumptions, are we going to open office, close an office, those sorts of things, right? But then as far as the numbers go, all plans fail first contact, right?
Yep.
Yeah, so every single month we reforecast. But our business is not that complicated to reforecast, right? And then so it depends what type of business you're in. But with modern ERPs, you can reforecast every month. It's not that big a deal.
Yep.
Yeah. The key is though having your leadership team understand what you're doing, because there's still a lot of people don't entirely appreciate that annual budget and quarterly reviews came out of an era where it was very difficult to put financial detail together. Like you'd have armies of accountants with calculators and they'd only do a report once a quarter because you just couldn't do it faster than that, right?
Right.
And so all those disciplines that people rely on, they're more traditions than disciplines, right? Today, with a modern ERP, like small, medium, large, you can push a button and see your financial results instantly. So why wouldn't you model every single month to get the most accurate information and revise your? That's my thinking anyway. There's no consensus really.
That sounds like absolute death for me. That would be really very painful for me. And I guess that's why we have these conversations, because that sounds like a great idea, and I can hear the sense of it. But am I going to do that? Probably not, and it's probably going to be to the detriment of my business. But the time spent on that, and probably you're going to say, well, Matthew, you're going to sharpen the saw before you go out and try to fell a tree. But I'd rather go and try to sell another one to the right person. So
what it does get back to those, what are you asking your finance person to do for you, if you have one? By the way. And
yeah, we do. Yeah.
And so it's really, I don't want reports. I want your forecast. That's just try that. Actually, ask that question this month and see how you go.
Yeah, because I get reports and I read them and go, I know that. Because sort of circling back all the way to the beginning of the conversation, if the salesperson doesn't understand how profitable the business is, that's not a very good salesperson, or they don't have a good enough understanding of how the business makes money. And really, the sales and marketing department their job is to understand how the business makes money. So,
can I reframe that just a bit though?
Sure.
Because sales and marketing responsibility, how we earn revenue, how we make money is the rest of the company.
Interesting distinction. I guess maybe I'm a little bit too much of a salesperson.
That's right, because your operations people, let's say your sales marketing team doing a great job in selling within the brackets they need to sell in, discount levels, price book, all of that, right? Then and ideally in your planning, you've said, well, for that piece of work, we can do it at this gross margin.
Yep.
That's the responsibility of your ops team.
Yes, you're right.
And if they can't do that gross margin, there needs to be a really fast process to reinform sales what's going on. To go on for a whole year like that, and they're just struggling to actually, and you're just losing on every single project. Well, you need to increase your price or stop selling it if you can't be competitive. Doesn't matter what we think's happening in the marketplace.
Yep.
Yeah. So
anyway,
and
so my reports are backward facing, and so I read them and go, no, yeah. But yeah, actually, I'll have a conversation with my finance team and say, look, I'd like to get some forecasts. Maybe that's how we finish the conversation today with for the people out there listening. Actually, by the way, we've so far we've got about 290 people who have actually watched the recording. So just want to thank yours and my families. I guess that's the people who are watching this
and friends.
So so maybe go and have a conversation. That's the task. If this is the sort of forum to issue tasks to our listeners, that's the task: is go out and have a conversation with your finance people and say, look, the reports are good, but actually forecasts are better.
Yeah, and you know what? If you don't know in the first month, give it your best guess, because every time they do it, they'll get better. Because they'll be looking at the numbers differently, Matt, is the key thing. From that point of view, I want to say one final thing, though. What you are doing right now is driving your car by looking exclusively in your revision mirror.
Totally.
That's what we used to joke about in accounting. Organization. So you need both. You need your revision mirror to see where you've gone and where you're going. But forecasting, I didn't expect us to get here today. It is a passion of mine, so you better be very careful. This will be the podcast series forever if you want to stay on this topic.
It's interesting. I'm here to learn. That's why I enjoy our conversations. I have a very myopic or single way of looking at the business, which is, I just need to go make more sales, and if it's not profitable, sell something else or put the price up. You're absolutely right. And maybe that's I've only got an 8-person business, and we're working with this particular niche, so we know exactly what it costs to actually deliver. Maybe that saved us, but I'm going to do that. I'm going to ask those questions.
You are connected to both ends of the equation, but imagine you're at 60 people.
Oh yeah, well, at one stage we had 70 in across multiple businesses. And one of my companies that I was the lead salesperson for was propping up the other 6. There was a huge cash burn across the other 6. So look, that's why this is the CEO and the Salesman's podcast, not the 2 CEOs, because I do own a business, but and I've run multiple businesses over my years, but certainly there's a maturity or a different way of thinking across the 2 of us.
Thank you, Matt. It's been fun again.
Very good. Thanks, everybody. If you please hit subscribe, like, share, do all those normal things. Yeah, we're going to point down, don't we? So we're now.
I don't know which way.
Anyway, look, thanks very much for listening, and I'll see you again next week. Bye.
Thanks,
for now.
everybody. Bye.
Thanks for listening to the CEO and Salesman podcast. If you've got a leadership, sales, or business question, we'd love to hear it. And of course, we'd also love to add our 2 cents on the subject. Tune in for next week where we talk about all these things and more. Bye for now.